Committee will come to order.
You got it. Can call worse, right?
We meet today to consider three pending nominations. The three nominations are Dr. Geraldine Richmond to be the Undersecretary for Science of the Department of Energy, Ms. Cynthia Stachelberg to be the Assistant Secretary of the Interior for Policy Management and Budget, and Dr. Asmeret Burhy. Is that correct? Asmeret? Thank you. To be the Director of the Office of Science at the Department of Energy. I want to welcome to all three. Thank you very much for being here. And we're going to welcome each of your family members that are with you and thank them for attending, or if they're in virtual, we appreciate that. The Office of Undersecretary for Science, to which Dr. Richmond has been nominated, was established by the Energy Policy Act of 2005 in recognition of the important role that science and scientific research plays within the Department of Energy. The Undersecretary for Science serves as the Secretary's principal advisor on science and technology, monitors the Department's wide-ranging researching and development programs, and oversees the management of the national laboratories. By law, the Undersecretary for Science must have an extensive background in science or engineering. Dr. Richmond very clearly meets this test. She holds a doctorate in physical chemistry from Berkeley. She has been a professor at the University of Oregon for the past 26 years. She is the author of more than 200 scientific papers, and she has received dozens of honorary awards, medals, prizes, degrees, and other honors in recognition of her scientific achievements. If confirmed, as I am sure she will be, Dr. Richmond will be the fifth person and the first woman to hold this important office. Our next nominee is Winnie Stackleberg, who has been nominated to be the Assistant Secretary of the Interior for Policy Management and Budget. The office of an Assistant Secretary for Administration was originally established by President Truman and did not require Senate confirmation. Congress created the current statutory Assistant Secretaryship in 1971 in recognition of the importance of the office's function and to increase its stature and effectiveness. In some respects, the Department of the Interior is a collection of separate bureaus. The Assistant Secretary for Policy, Management, and Budget helps cement them together by developing policy, managing operations, and formulating budgets across the breadth of the department. The Assistant Secretary serves as the Secretary's principal policy advisor and the department's chief financial officer. She oversees a diverse collection of offices ranging from the Budget Office to the Wildland Fire Office, and from the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations to the Office of Natural Resources Revenue. It is an important job, and I am pleased to see that Ms. Stachelberg has a graduate degree in public administration and has worked as a budget analyst at the Office of Management and Budget. Our third nominee, Dr. Burhy, has been nominated to be Director of the Office of Science. Although the department is named the Department of Energy, science has always been at the core of the department. But as a seedbed of science, the department has given us the technologies to increase our energy production and use our resources in a cleaner way. It has given us supercomputers and nuclear deterrence without testing. It has even helped develop the internet. The Office of Science lies at the heart of the department's science mission. The office's mission by law is to deliver the scientific discoveries, capabilities, and major scientific tools to transform the understanding of nature and to advance the energy, economic, and national security of the United States. That is no small task. Judging from the list of scientific papers you have written and the list of academic honors and awards that you have received, Dr. Burhy, is clear that you have the scientific credentials this job requires. Again, I want to extend my warm welcome to all three of our distinguished nominees. And I want to thank you for being here this morning and for the willingness to undertake these important positions. At this point, I'll recognize my friend, Senator John Barrasso, for his opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I also want to welcome and congratulate the nominees, Dr. Richmond, Dr. Berhe, and Dr. Stachelberg. Welcome to the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee. Congratulations on the nominations. If confirmed as Undersecretary for Science and Energy, Dr. Richmond, you would have an important responsibility spanning the Office of Science and the Department Applied Energy offices. You've been a chemistry professor for over 40 years, including the last 35 years at the University of Oregon, served in leadership positions on numerous boards, received many awards and honors, as the chairman just mentioned, all related to the Department of Energy and the scientific community with which it collaborates. You appear to be highly qualified to serve as the Undersecretary of Science and Energy. I cannot say the same for Dr. Berhe's specific qualifications to serve as Director of the Office of Science at the Department of Energy. Dr. Berhe has been a professor of soil biogeochemistry at the University of California, Merced, for over a decade, has focused her research on soil management and sequestering carbon in soil. Her background and experience appear to have very little to do with the Department of Energy's main scientific focus and the scientific community with which it collaborates. On a May 9th, 2021 op-ed in the Wall Street Journal by a theoretical physicist noted, Ms. Berhe's research program on soil chemistry, exploring the capture of carbon dioxide, is relevant to climate change policy. But her research expertise isn't in any of the Office of Science's major programs, and she has no expertise as a scientific administrator and minimal experience with the Energy Department itself. Past directors, this goes on from the Wall Street Journal, past directors have been established researchers from one of the major fields supported by the department, or they have administered large private laboratories, such as Bell Labs, in line with the demands of the job. It's hard not to wonder whether Ms. Berhe is the right choice for the leadership role at the Department of Energy. Certain public positions Dr. Berhe has taken and endorsed are also concerning. On February 18th of this year, she retweeted the statement, "I'm just going to propose that a nation that can land an SUV-sized rover in an ancient lake on another planet can build an electrical grid that is effing useless because of slavish devotion to the free market." Effing useless because of slavish devotion to the free market. On May 7th of 2015, she wrote in Science that the practice of farming is to blame for climate change. The practice of farming is to blame for climate change. Mr. Chairman, I'm also concerned about Ms. Stachelberg's qualifications to serve in the position to which she has been nominated. The Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget plays a central role in policy development, organizational management, and fiscal stewardship of the Department of Interior. Ms. Stachelberg appears to have little, if any, background or experience in public lands, in natural resources, in energy, or other policy issues managed by the Department of Interior. For the past 25 years, Ms. Stachelberg has worked as a political activist at the Center for American Progress and the Human Rights Campaign. The only issue she appears to focus on in the even remotely within the realm of the Department of Interior is gun control. While I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment and the sportsmen and women that rely upon it, I don't believe that gun control advocacy is a helpful qualification for the job of the Department of Interior. Again, welcome to each of the nominees. I look forward to hearing more about your qualifications, your policy views, and your plans for ensuring the work of the Department of Energy and Interior, how that could benefit all Americans, including those in my home state of Wyoming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. The rules of the committee, which apply to all nominees, require that they be sworn in connection with their testimony. So if you all will please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give to the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Before we begin our statement, your statements, I'm going to ask 3 questions addressed to each nominee before this committee. Will you be available to appear before the committee and other congressional committees to represent department positions and respond to issues of concern to the Congress?
I will.
Are you aware of any personal holdings, investments, or interests that could constitute a conflict of interest or create the appearance of such a conflict should you be confirmed and assume the office to which you have been nominated by the President?
No.
Are you involved or do you have any assets held in a blind trust?
No.
We're going to start with our first witness, Dr. Richmond, but we have a very dear senator who had conflicts, but he's virtual with us, and he wants the privilege of introducing you. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your thoughtfulness in giving me this opportunity. And we Oregon Ducks really appreciate your incredible send-off for Dr. Richmond this morning. Your words really summed it up, and I'm not going to give a filibuster this morning. I will say, though, you touched on her many scientific honors since she's been teaching if I were to list them all, Mr. Chairman, you would be here until tomorrow morning going through this. She has an extraordinary record, and for my personal involvement, I have known about her expertise for some time, and frankly, we feel it would be impossible to have too many Oregon Ducks serving in key administration roles. I would also like to note as we get started that she has been recognized by President Clinton, President Obama, and President Reagan for her scientific expertise. And it will sure be needed right now, because in her position at DOE, because of her expertise in drought, she can help us develop a scientific response to drought, which is one of the real keys to reducing fire risk. And I will just close by way of saying we're really going to need Dr. Richmond to focus on that. Just last month, my hometown saw record heat temperatures with as high as 116 degrees. Mr. Chairman, you've been very helpful to me as chairman of the Finance Committee, because we got a law passed so that Medicare Advantage plans could provide air conditioning and air filtration systems for seniors with chronic conditions who are just trying to breathe in these conditions. And a very significant portion of the deaths that we had during our record heat dealt with elders who clearly were suffering those kinds of health problems. Finally, I think her expertise in drought and the relationship to fire risk is going to be of huge help to us, because we are still dealing with the bootleg fire at home, and that is going to be an enormous concern of Westerners through the months ahead. Finally, she's got some real expertise in another set of important issues, alternative energy being an area that will go front and center to her work in the days ahead at the national labs. And the West and all of America can't wait to act on climate. We're seeing the effects of inaction now. Dr. Richmond is exactly the right kind of person at the right time for the Office of Science, and we could not admire her more for her scientific achievements, her professional analytic skills, and Mr. Chairman, to have you give us this big send-off for her, along with Presidents Clinton, Obama, and Reagan, and their past statements, I think I'll quit while we're ahead, because this is an exceptional individual.
Thank you, Senator. And to all three of our witnesses, before you give your testimonies, if you have a family or friends here that you want to, they're here for support and you want to recognize, please feel free to do so. We're happy to have them. And we're going to start with Dr. Richmond, you first. If you have any of your family here, please feel free.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. I do. I have my husband of over 40 years here, Dr. Steve Cavan.
Good to have you, sir.
Great, great. Well, Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and the distinguished members of the committee, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to appear before you today. I am so honored to discuss my nomination to serve as Undersecretary for Science and Energy at the Department of Energy. As a research scientist, I have had a long association with DOE, starting with a summer research internship at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory when I was 21. Later, I have received DOE funding for my own research, and I've served in leadership roles on many of the department's basic and applied sciences advisory boards. From my visits over the years to many of the DOE laboratories, I know firsthand that they are indeed the crown jewels of the nation's research and innovation domain. These labs, along with thousands of initiatives funded by competitive DOE grants, are achieving groundbreaking discoveries and breakthroughs that long have made the United States the envy of the world in science and engineering. Now myself, growing up in Kansas on a farm, I could never have envisioned the career opportunities I've experienced over the years through science. In fact, as a little girl, I could dream no bigger than just going to college, which was my parents' aspiration for me because the Depression had deprived them of that dream. My gift for math opened up possibilities in science, and beginning with my undergraduate studies at Kansas State University in chemistry and graduate work at Berkeley, my world and my worldview have been expanding ever since. In my laboratory at the University of Oregon, my students and I use lasers to study issues relevant to energy production, environmental remediation, atmospheric chemistry, including carbon capture. Our work has resulted in many publications and many great students, and as noted, I've been honored by many awards. But science has also given me countless opportunities to serve on national and advisory boards, as presidents of scientific societies, as U.S. State Department Science Envoy, and as founding member of a grassroots organization that's helped over 25,000 women and minority scientists and engineers around the globe. These experiences provided me with a deep understanding of the scientific enterprise of this country, and even more, its power to solve our problems and improve our lives. I come before you today as the scientific challenges for our nation and our world have never been greater. I believe the magnitude of the solutions outweighs even the Manhattan Project, as climate change poses an existential threat to the entire planet. I've been to all 50 states. I've worked in countries on every continent, including over a dozen in Africa. I have seen the human cost of climate change, the growing shortage of clean water resources, job displacement, and inequities in access to energy. But I also have experienced the boundless energy and creativity of our human resources, and I deeply understand our capabilities, and I know solutions are within reach. If I'm confirmed to lead DOE's science and innovation ecosystem, I plan to set several priorities that will muster our resources and place the United States at the forefront of these solutions. First, I want to ensure you that we will continue our preeminent role in every step of the process of innovation, from making fundamental discoveries to developing new energy technologies to ramping up to scale mass production and deployment. This is not like a relay race, where the baton is passed from one stage easily to the next. As challenges arise from our journey, we need the discovery science to be ready to intercede in the technological development and deployment. DOE's national laboratories, user facilities, frontier energy research centers, ARPA-E, and others are uniquely situated around the country for such long-haul mediating efforts. Second, I want to strengthen partnerships with other federal agencies, as well as private technology and energy enterprises in the country and around the world. With the urgency of the task before us, we must resist the impulse to compete against one another and develop collaborations that will move us faster and farther together. I have been honored to serve as chair of the DOE's Basic Energy Science and Advisory Committee and as an appointee by both President Obama and President Trump to the National Science Board, and have worked with leaders in the laboratories and offices of the Department of Defense and Commerce. I look forward to using these leadership experiences to strengthen the connections among our vast national community of innovators. And finally, if confirmed, I also will foster a dynamic science and technology workforce that reflects the diversity of our population and geography, both urban and rural. I have a deep understanding and a passion for what is needed to identify, train, and support the best and the brightest among us. And I look forward to ensuring that the DOE laboratories and the programs of the department funds become a model for diversity. We are stronger and smarter and simply better when we all seize possibilities together. And there's no better place on this planet for scientific discovery and innovation than a country built on the premise of joining forces. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to appear before you today, and I do look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. And now we'll hear from Ms. Stachelberg, and if you have anybody you want to introduce, feel free to do so.
I want to recognize my partner, Vicki Phillips, who's here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, members of the committee, it is a privilege to be here today and to be considered as the President's nominee to be the Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget at the U.S. Department of Interior. I want to take this moment not only to recognize my partner Vicki, who is here, but my sons Will and Charlie. They could not be here today, but they make me all the more driven to play a small part in making a brighter future. President Biden and Secretary Haaland have given me a great honor by nominating me for this role. It is a post at one of the most important departments at one of the most important and challenging of times, and the prospect of taking on this position is more than a job to me. Like many of you and many Americans, I have always loved the outdoors. and in particular, the sheer beauty of what this country has to offer. I have been a lifelong angler and boater, and I credit my parents for instilling in me a love for nature and our place in it. Henry David Thoreau, the great writer and naturalist, once wrote, "Heaven is under our feet as well as above our heads." And I think that just about sums up the feeling of being in one of our national parks, credible monuments, and taking in the marvel of what is around you. I remember being a 9-year-old city kid, wide-eyed with my jaw to the floor at the sight of the Grand Canyon. And as a young adult, I went diving and took in the sheer wonder of the Buck Island Reef National Monument. And more recently, I took my kids to visit the Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge to see the white pelicans making their trek from east of the Rockies to Florida. I am also very aware of what lands mean to Western states, where large percentages of their area are managed by the Department of the Interior. This includes millions of acres of multiple use lands, where it is imperative for the department to work with states, tribes, and a diverse group of stakeholders to strike the right balance. As we do so, it is imperative that we take action to address the threat of climate change poses to communities across the United States and in the West in particular, which is in the throes of unprecedented drought and devastating wildfires. We also face important questions when it comes to clean energy and wildlife conservation, fishing and hunting, and access to our public lands and heritage. How we address these challenges will have far-reaching ramifications. I sit here mindful that if I have the privilege of being confirmed as Assistant Secretary, I will dedicate myself fully to working with this committee to meet those challenges. The role of Assistant Secretary for Policy, Management, and Budget requires me to be a leader. It will require me to guide programs with national and international concern across bureaus and offices, to lead an inclusive workforce to optimize the mission of the administration, and to spearhead budget formulation to make key decisions when it comes to priorities and goals, and to ensure that the department complies with statutory and regulatory requirements. For more than 2 decades, I have helped lead organizations and develop the skills necessary to fulfill these functions. As a senior leader at the Center for American Progress and the Human Rights Campaign, I have been key in developing and driving strategy. I have also had the honor of managing a large number of driven, dynamic staff tackling a whole range of issues, and I have exhibited steady leadership when it has come to personnel and human resource challenges. Challenges that include addressing diversity and equity issues to ensure that wherever I serve, there is a workplace culture where employees can thrive and grow. At both these organizations, I have also executed cross-cutting personnel and policy efforts, managed complex budget and financial projects, and collaborated with key stakeholders, often with differing perspectives. I take pride in the fact that I have worked with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to achieve results and make progress. I have worked with organizations like the American Enterprise Institute, the Chamber of Commerce, the Bipartisan Policy Center, and the McCain Institute, to name a few. I also have a strong record of success, and I say all of this that I believe I have the experience and the acumen to take on this role, and I am ready to get to work. Thank you for inviting me to be in front of this committee today. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss my nomination, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stachelberg. And now we'll hear from Dr. Berhe. Doctor, if you have someone you want to introduce, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you, Senator. I would like to acknowledge my husband and my kids who are virtually joining the event today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and members of the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. It's my great honor to appear before this committee as President Biden's nominee for the Director of the Office of Science at the Department of Energy. I thank the President and Secretary Granholm for trusting me to help lead the next chapter in the great scientific success story of the Office of Science. Allow me to acknowledge my family and friends whose love and support I am fortunate to have, especially my husband, Professor Tamrat Aforke Gazahey, our children, Essay and Ililta, and my parents, Gidey Wildasalasi Khatama and the late Asefaw Burhy Hagos. I was born in the Horn of Africa in Eritrea. I grew up in a wonderful family with two great parents and role models who not only were first-generation middle school graduates, but also received college degrees while working to support their families and raising 6 kids. The fact that I'm appearing in front of you here today is a testament to the incredible power of education to transform a person's life. My parents instilled in me the value of education and respect for knowledge and ignited my love of science and the natural environment. I am now fortunate to be a professor at the University of California, Merced, an institution with genuine commitment and demonstrated success in serving communities that had historically been underserved. I'm an earth scientist and educator. I'm passionate about soil, the thin veil of loose material covering the land surface, but has an outsized role in regulating life as we know it. Soil is the most complex biomaterial that we know of. It regulates the Earth's climate. It's home to the most abundant and diverse forms of life on the Earth system and is foundational to human and national security. Because of the complexity of soil, scientific investigations that seek to unravel the physical, chemical, and biological processes that take place in the soil system and the energy support systems that support said processes require advanced experimental, observational, and computational tools and interdisciplinary perspectives. This is why earth scientists, including me, have had a career-long ties to the Department of Energy, the national labs, and the advanced facilities that the Office of Science manages. As a soil and global change scientist who has studied and worked in public institutions of higher learning, I have always taken my responsibility to serve the public very seriously. I believe publicly funded science and technology are critical for inspiring the next generation of scholars, and scholars have a responsibility to equitably serve the diverse communities of taxpayers that make our scientific careers and love of scientific research possible, and work to cultivate society's trust in science. I approach my nomination to serve as the director of the Office of Science with the expertise of an Earth system scientist that works across and synthesizes knowledge from multiple scientific areas and teams. The integrative systems perspective that I would bring, if confirmed, is uniquely suited for this role, especially for the current time when we need to urgently address multiple issues that are critical for not just pushing the frontiers of science, but also to address the ongoing climate emergency, the need for workforce development, and to promote better understanding and trust in the scientific process. It is evident that no one person can be an expert in the entirety of the wide-ranging portfolio of scientific endeavors that the Office of Science supports. My experience with scientific investigations across multiple disciplines covering spatial scales ranging from the molecular to the globe and processes that occur from seconds to geologic timescales is an asset as we seek to address fundamental processes that hold the key for environmental, energy, and national security challenges of our time. It has never been more critical that we employ a systems approach to support scientific endeavors that push the frontiers of knowledge. The nation's response to the COVID-19 pandemic has clearly demonstrated what is possible when we continue to fund basic science and then allow scientists from across multiple fields to work in the most advanced scientific facilities, including facilities managed by the Office of Science, to enable timely discoveries. If I am confirmed, my vision for the Office of Science is to ensure that I support and enable the office's mission to deliver scientific discoveries to transform our understanding of nature and advance the energy, economic, and national security of the United States. I am committed to fostering a supportive scientific enterprise for staff and researchers from across all fields to ensure that U.S. science and technology remains preeminent, well-supported, at the cutting edge, and continues to inspire and inform decisions in society. If I am confirmed, I commit to you that I will provide strong leadership for the Office of Science's mission. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you all for your statements. I appreciate it very much. We're going to start with our questions now. If you can, in your answers, try to be as direct and brief as you can. We're able to hear more and learn more about you and have more dialogue. So thank you so much. I'll start the questioning. And Dr. Richmond, the Department of Energy's Organization Act vests the department's function in the secretary and gives her broad authority to delegate those functions and organize the department as she thinks best. Secretary Moniz gave the Undersecretary of Science responsibility not only for science but for most energy programs, including fossil energy, nuclear energy, energy efficiency, and renewable energy and electricity. That was undone in the last administration and then reinstated in February before Secretary Granholm was confirmed. So my question would be, have you discussed your portfolio with Secretary Granholm? Will you oversee the Department's energy programs as well as its science programs?
Thank you, Senator Manchin. It is indeed a big task to take on, and I'm ready for it. I indeed have discussed this with the Secretary. I understand what the role is. I've had many briefings and am learning a lot, but also realize that my expertise that I have to address some of the most important issues that are on the table, I'm ready to take on. I must say the nice thing about this particular position is the integration of the science and applied research. I look forward to that.
So I would say follow up on that. Do you agree that your principal task, if confirmed, will be to foster scientific discovery and technology innovation? And how do you plan to go about that?
Yes, absolutely. As I said, I have several priorities, but one particular to that issue is to make sure that as we go from discovery research to going all the way to where we develop technologies and deploy them and also create jobs, to help make that as seamless as possible, to break down silos and make sure that we can work effectively, and that is my role, and I will take that on.
Thank you very much. Ms. Stachelberg, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget has a very broad portfolio and authority over more than 24 different program offices, ranging from native Hawaiians to natural resource revenues, invasive species, to wildland fires, law enforcement, to hearings and appeals. So no one can give equal attention to the day-to-day operations of all these offices. And so the Assistant Secretary is aided by 5 deputies and, of course, individual offices directors, enabling the Assistant Secretary to focus on the issues that need your attention most. So where do you see yourself, if confirmed, focusing most of your attention, and where do you think most of the attention needs to be focused?
Chairman Manchin, thank you so much for that question. You are exactly right that the breadth of the Assistant Secretary's portfolio is wide, and I'm looking forward to getting to the department, if I'm confirmed, to tackle these challenges. I see a couple of areas of focus to start out. I think one of the first is really ensuring that the department is fully staffed, really focusing on ensuring that the Department of Interior has the appropriate staff to address the challenges that you mentioned. A second priority area is the wildland fire program. I mean, we see drought and severe fire, especially in the West. That seems to be an area of what I'd like to spend increased attention on. And then finally, priorities that have to do with management and budget, something I've been doing my entire career, working to address and develop and promulgate budgets, and I look forward to, if confirmed, working on those issues.
Thank you. Dr. Berhe, we passed the Energy Act at the end of last year. It authorized over $35 billion to invest in innovative energy solutions like CCUS, advanced nuclear, renewables, and energy storage, just to name a few. This was the first significant update to our energy policy in 13 years, and it was incredibly bipartisan, with close to 70 senators co-sponsoring or sponsoring pieces of legislation. In addition, earlier this year, the Senate passed the Endless Frontier Act, which will make additional funds available to the Office of Science. So how will you, if confirmed, ensure the additional sums made available to the Office of Science to fund the basic research are wisely spent and provide the greatest possible return in terms of scientific discoveries and technological innovation?
Thank you, Chairman Manchin. Let me start by thanking the committee and the senators that work on both of those acts. Very important indeed. I think it's extremely important that we are not just working on, we're trying to innovate the newest technologies and advanced and cleaner energy options, But as you stated, carbon capture technology is an important part of that equation. I've spent a big part of my life in particular on natural solutions for carbon capture, but there are also a number of engineered approaches there. I'm committed to making sure that all those resources are spent wisely, to make sure that they're helping us push again the frontiers of the science in this area, but at the same time see also a very smooth transition to having these technologies be applied and help address the energy and climate-related challenge, and all of that's super helpful. And I look forward to the opportunity to talk to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. And now Senator Barrasso for your question.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The three of you, I'm sorry I have to ask the question of all these nominees, but prior to this hearing, each of you has sworn under oath that your answers to the committee's written questionnaires are current, accurate, and complete. So would each of you just please verbally affirm that your answers to the questionnaire are current, accurate, and complete?
Yes.
Yes.
Have any of you ever threatened the physical safety of federal officials verbally or in writing?
No.
Have any of you ever been affiliated or collaborated with an organization that uses violence against fellow Americans?
No.
No.
Thank you. Ms. Stachelberg, I have a series of short questions for you, and since your job is at the Department of Interior. You quoted Henry David Thoreau, Walden. It is during his Walden years. He has written, "I went to the woods because I wished to be there deliberately." So can tree spiking kill or maim loggers, mill workers, and firefighters?
You know, Senator, thank you for your question. I'm here to discuss my nomination and not anything about that, so I don't understand.
So can
the
tree
context.
spiking kill or maim loggers, mill workers, or firefighters? It's a simple yes or no question.
As a general matter, yes.
Okay, and it's a crime on federal lands?
Yes.
Thank you. Individuals who are aware of spiked trees, they should inform and cooperate with law enforcement?
Senator, I certainly will cooperate with law enforcement, have done
So somebody that was aware of that should as well.
If you're asking me the question about me and how I would handle that, I will cooperate with law enforcement as I have done my entire life.
Should individuals who disagree with federal policies threaten the physical safety of federal officials?
Senator, if you're asking me the question whether I have done that, I have never threatened federal officials or anyone else.
Should individuals who plan or are otherwise involved in tree spiking incidents and threaten the physical safety of federal officials, should they expect to be hired by the Department of Interior, which you've been nominated to?
Senator, again, I'm here to discuss my nomination for the Assistant Secretary for Policy Managed Budget, and interested in answering questions about my nomination and my past actions and my vision for this position, which is critically important. I mean, we have so many important challenges, climate change being one of them, and I really look forward to working with you and this committee in a bipartisan fashion to address those issues.
So you agree tree spiking can kill, maim loggers, mill workers, and firefighters?
Senator, again, I really wish to address questions that have to do with my portfolio and the challenging job that I've been nominated for. And if I'm confirmed, I'd be happy to work with you and others on the committee to address those issues.
Dr. Berhe, you've clearly are a very respected scientist. But your expertise is in soil science, not physics or energy generation. This has led to some criticism of your selection to head this specific office at the Department of Energy. The majority of the Office of Sciences research is in areas of physics, high-performance computing. Do you have any experience managing programs in these areas?
Thank you, Senator, for your question. Yes, my background is in soil science, biogeochemistry, and I'm an earth system scientist. So I have not worked in the areas of physics, but I assure you that if I were to be confirmed for this position, no area of focus within the DOE's vast research portfolio would be shortchanged in any way. As you know, these research priorities for DOE are set with this very deliberate and thoughtful, discussions and consultation with Congress and the scientific community, and I abide by those in making sure that the science remains highly supported.
So the Office of Science has an annual budget of more than $7 billion. The director of the office leads over 800 federal employees oversees 10 national laboratories with more than 26,000 employees. What kind of management experience do you have that would prepare you for this role?
Thank you again, Senator. So I'm an academic by training, and my areas of expertise have so far been, in the areas of academic research, science and technology, and workforce development. So clearly, this is a slightly different approach, but my work so far in pushing not just the scientific advances in multiple areas of research, but also workforce development and consultation with multiple national and international efforts are well recognized. And I believe I bring an Earth System Sciences perspective that allows me to expand and work on these important issues. Thank you.
And then, Ms. Stachelberg, in 2016, you just talked about working in a bipartisan way on climate change. In a 2016 interview with C-SPAN, you stated that Republicans are, quote, climate deniers. Your statement, C-SPAN, all Republicans climate deniers. Do you stand by that characterization today?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that quote, but I certainly have worked with Republicans and Democrats, not just on climate change, but a range of issues. And so I have worked in a bipartisan fashion. And if I spoke about the Republican Party, I may have been talking about particular senators, but I have had a career of working in a bipartisan fashion and with organizations that I don't always see eye to eye in. I will say that the position for which I've been nominated at the Department of Interior is a different position from the ones that I have held. Being a public servant is different from being at an organization with ideological views, and I understand that distinction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stachelberg, if nominated, you'll have a key role in stewarding on our public lands. I want to ask you about the failed oil and gas sale lease earlier this year and rights to drill in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge. I say failed because you know that the sale lease brought in a paltry $6 million to the Treasury. That is 0.67% of the $1.1 billion estimated that was used to justify opening this pristine wildlife refuge in 2017. In fact, the Trump administration spent more on preparing for the failed lease than what they raised. So to me, they didn't count a lot of associated costs and harm to communities and impacts. I understand that in the last hour, the Department of Interior announced they will conduct a new environmental review of the Arctic wildlife drilling program that will include consideration of greenhouse gas impacts. How do you think the newly announced environmental review will help us get a more accurate cost for Arctic drilling?
Thank you, Senator, for your question. And I'm not familiar with a recently issued review. I will say that your point about does show the limited commercial benefits and interest. And I'm not currently at the department, but if I'm confirmed, I look forward to working with you and others on the committee and receiving a briefing on that really important issue.
But you do agree that you need accurate costs and cost assessments.
I absolutely believe that you need accurate costs, and I look forward to working with you and others at the Department of Interior to assess and gather those accurate costs.
Thank you. Ms. Richmond, on the efforts of our national labs and R&D, some people have already mentioned USICA and our efforts to increase the R&D budget. While the support of many of my colleagues, we were able to authorize $17 billion in that. Do you support an increase in funding for the Department of Energy?
Thank you for that question, Senator Cantwell. Yes.
Okay. Do you support a doubling of DOE's innovation budget? Or I guess I could broaden the question to, if we actually doubled that, we'd see an additional $40 billion. What kind of results do you think we could expect from that kind of initiative? I'm referring to a report that was done on the National Academy of Sciences and the Bipartisan Policy Group on Breakthrough Energy Institute, and some of the findings in that report of what we would then be able to achieve. And specifically what I'm after here is the dynamics have changed. This is not even really, in my mind now, about carbon. It's not. This is about what energy economies are you going to chase. And if you don't do the R&D, we're going to fall behind on these energy economies. And the rest of the world, everybody's all decided. The consumer has decided. Other countries have decided. Everybody's moving off of carbon. So what are we going to do to chase those economies in those solutions, because if we don't, we're going to be without a lot of jobs. So the report characterized this very well. What are you thinking more investment on the R&D side would help in doing this?
Thank you, Senator Cantwell, for that really important question. We are the envy of the world when it comes to fundamental science and discovery science. And we have the potential of falling behind if we don't continue to invest and increase our investments in the basic sciences. That's where we will continue to win if we continue to provide support for them at our DOE laboratories in particular and our facilities. Our facilities have just been critical for many of the advances that we have had in the past and that we need to go forward. And so but we need funding for those facilities in addition to our laboratories and our research scientists around. Now, how could we make that change to where we really are going to have an impact? I think we need, by funding these activities, things like ARPA-E, our energy research centers, that are really working very hard to go from discovery to the technology and then further to deployment to create the jobs. Those kinds of programs and others that the Department of Energy is launching, I think, are going to be game changers with regards to our ability to get to the end point that we need to have. We cannot lose this race. We cannot lose this race. So the funding is critical to make sure that we can provide the technologies that are the technologies of the future to keep jobs going as we make the changes in advances in our energy technologies.
Thank you. Ms. Burhy, I'll ask you a question for the record, but it's a similar question where the economics just lose if we don't get it right, and that is that coastal region, 17% of U.S. land, but they're more than half of the population and wealth of our natural resource economies. If we don't do good coastal zone management, vulnerable to the seas and surges and tsunamis, and understanding this, we're going to have a problem. So look forward to your work on soils and coastal issues and getting an answer for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stachelberg, we'll start with you. On March 22nd of this year, you tweeted, quote, "Pass universal background checks and ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Deliver solutions and results. That's what voters want," close quote. So it appears that you advocate banning certain kinds of firearms and magazines. Let's start with the firearms. Just as briefly as you can, tell me what you define as an assault weapon.
You know, Senator, I just want to start out by saying, like President Biden, I believe we have too much gun violence in this country.
Sure. I get that. I'm just wondering what you define as an assault weapon, because you want to ban them. You want to know what you mean by that.
And so in my position at the Center for American Progress, I held certain positions. I have been nominated to be the Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget, and will follow the President's policies. I just also want to say that I am a supporter of the Second Amendment to the Constitution and believe that hunting, recreational shooting on public lands should be followed.
I get that. I appreciate all of that. We're on a tight time constraint. I've only got a few minutes, so just tell me what you mean by assault weapon. Something you want to ban, I just want to know what you mean by that.
You know, what I said as a Center for American Progress employee was to reduce gun violence, getting assault weapons, AR-15s, out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. And I believe that gun violence is a problem in this country, along with President Biden. But as I said, I'm a believer in the Second Amendment.
Okay. So you've mentioned AR-15s. Any other type of weapon you'd want to ban? What do you define as the weapon you want to define? You've said assault weapons. The only weapon you've mentioned so far is AR-15. Is that the only gun you want to ban?
Senator, I was speaking in a certain context as working at the Center for American Progress. That is not the position that I've been nominated for now, and I will follow the laws that are passed by Congress.
Does the Second Amendment confer an individual right to bear arms?
Yes.
Do you support the Department of the Interior's current positions and policies allowing concealed carry and allowing hunting on federal public lands, subject, of course, to compliance with state law?
I will support all the laws of this land, including those that you just mentioned, yes.
Now, the Wild Horse and Burro program has been struggling for years to bring herds to appropriate management levels. This has led to a massive humanitarian concern and immense suffering among our equine friends that are part of this program. How do you believe we can better use fertility treatments to get us to sustainable levels on the range?
Wild horses and burros populations, as you know, can double in size. It's a difficult issue because it puts stresses on landscapes and other species, and I am committed to humane treatment. I understand that the administration has proposed an increase in the budget to address this issue. And if I am confirmed, Senator, I look forward to working with you and others on this committee to address this issue.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, the President has stated his strong support for extending federal recognition to the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. Can you tell me why the administration supports the Lumbee recognition when they have not proceeded through the Office of Federal Acknowledgement?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that particular example, and if I would like to learn more about that, spend some time learning about that issue.
Okay. I ask about this because Obama-era updates to regulations governing federal acknowledgement of tribal entities significantly eased the requirements for petitioning for these groups. Do you feel like they should be eased further to facilitate acknowledgement of groups like the Lumbee?
You know, Senator, recognition of tribes is incredibly important. I know it is a priority of this administration and of Secretary Holland. I'm not currently at the department, but if I am confirmed, I look forward to working with you and others on this committee to ensure that we have proper recognition of tribes and have really enhanced the sacred trust that we have with Native Americans.
The Endangered Species Act is also something that plays a significant role in the operation of the Department of the Interior. And the Endangered Species Act has often been interpreted and applied in ways that have prevented forest management activities of the sort that are necessary to reduce the risk of wildfire. And ironically, this has in turn presented greater threats to wildlife. And so, unfortunately, when forests aren't managed, they can become more dangerous for the endangered species that exist there. You know, how do you think we can better implement forest management to prevent wildfires and protect species?
I just want to say at the outset, I want to note that I don't believe that there's a choice. I think it's a false choice between wildfire and the economy and species, and I do want to work with you and others on the committee to ensure that the Endangered Species Act is implemented correctly. I think it's been a success. We just have to look at the bald eagle or the American alligator to ensure that. As I noted in my opening, wildfires are a growing problem with severe drought and the prevalence of them. And I look forward to working with this committee to ensure that we address not just endangered species, but our forests as well. I mean, I was heartened to see in the bipartisan infrastructure deal, as it's been reported, that there is money for additional support for wildland fires. And I'm looking forward to, if I'm confirmed, working at the department to bring those disparate and often distinct bureaus and divisions at the Department of Interior together to address not just endangered species, but forest management. One of the things that I've done throughout my career is work with local stakeholders to ensure that we come up with solutions that are durable. I think forest management, wildfires, and endangered species and addressing those challenges are among the things that will require that kind of ability to bring different stakeholders from the local level, from private landowners to ranchers to farmers and others.
Thank you. I see my time's expired. I agree with you. The Endangered Species Act has in many ways been a success. To those species and to those humans whose habitats have been destroyed through mismanagement and misapplication of the Act, when we can see harm coming, fuel building up, and a refusal to treat them, that is less than a success, and I look forward to working with anyone within the department who can help address that. Thank you.
Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Ranking Member Barrasso. Ranking Member Barrasso, I have a letter here supporting Ms. Stachelberg's nomination that I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record. It is signed by groups ranging from the American Sport Fishing Association to the Archery Trade Association to the Hispanic Access Foundation, the Mule Deer Foundation, Outdoor Industry Association, and dozens of additional stakeholders in our public lands.
Without objection.
Ms. Stachelberg, one of the proudest moments that I've certainly had on this committee was passage of the Great American Outdoors Act, and that act provided guaranteed funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund and to fix public lands infrastructure that has fallen into disrepair. If confirmed, are you committed to fully utilizing those funds in each and every Department of Interior budget request?
Senator, thank you for the question. And yes, I am committed to doing so. I think that the bipartisan passage of the Great American Outdoors Act was a crowning achievement last year. It is certainly one of the priorities of the Secretary, effective implementation of the piece of the law. The goal is to meet the intent of Congress, and reduced maintenance is a terribly important component of congressional intent. And if I am confirmed, I look forward to working with you and others on this committee, ensuring that maintenance projects are taken care of, that backlog is reduced, and that the bureaus and divisions charged with deferred maintenance have the appropriate resources in order to do their jobs.
I appreciate that very much, and I would just point out it's also an incredible opportunity for the administration to use something we did last year to build back better. It's an enormous economic opportunity, the investments in that infrastructure. Dr. Richmond, in 2018, you oversaw the advisory body that put together that year's edition of Science and Engineering Indicators. That's a biennial congressionally mandated report that provides authoritative statistics on the status of science in the United States. According to an American Institute of Physics article published at the time, you expressed concern about U.S. R&D policy, saying that inadequate funding levels for R&D, quote, will continue to erode ability to be competitive to the level that you see other countries rising, such as China. Talk to me about where you see American R&D today, what has changed and what has not, and where your concerns are.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. This is important and this is timely. The way I've seen us since 2018, the numbers that came out in 2018 with regards to basically China starting to eclipse our capabilities was frightening, is frightening. It has, and especially when we think of ourselves as being a leader in the science and engineering enterprise, looking at the funding that China is pumping into their technology and research is incredible. But, you know, money is not the only thing. It's talent, and it's our facilities and our laboratories. And I worried then, and I still worry today, that do we have the funding that we need to keep our laboratories, keep our research groups going, we really need to make this competitive edge. Where we are ahead currently today, and hopefully for the future too, really is in the basic fundamental science. We are the leader, especially in the physical sciences, in materials, in a number of different areas that I could name. We cannot lose that. Now, we can spend our time looking over our shoulder, worrying about China. Instead, we need to look forward like in a race and say, let's be as innovative as we possibly can, get our scientists on board to be able to make the kind of changes that we need in order to stay ahead and be innovators. And I believe if we can do that, we will continue to be the leader in the world. But there are threats. There certainly are threats that are worrisome.
I think you articulated that very well. Dr. Berhe, congratulations on your nomination. You're a soil scientist well known for your climate-related research on soil carbon sequestration, which is becoming more and more recognized and relevant by the moment. I think that's a great background to run the Office of Science. Since the 50s, actually, the Office of Science has made major contributions to our understanding of environmental and earth system science research. And for example, it was behind the earliest research on atmospheric and ocean circulation that eventually became the climate and earth system models that we utilize and depend on so much today. As you know, the President's budget requested a 10% increase for biological and environmental research at the Office of Science. Can you talk to us a little bit about what some of the vital but underfunded initiatives are that you might champion if confirmed for this position.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, as you stated, soil carbon sequestration is an important area and an area that's a strongly has been a strong focus of BER and Office of Science activities in general. I think there's a number of activities that could benefit with an increase in budget for the BER program in particular, having to do with climate change responses, in particular thinking about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, for example, through a number of approaches, but as are also genome-enabled research in biology, synthetic biology of multiple different areas that have, has only risen in prominence over the last, several decades, and become even more important, the facilities that enable that kind of research too, as we've seen with COVID and the national research efforts that coordinated to understand the dynamics of that, how the viruses were changing and how to even tackle that important issue. So as there's vast areas of research that have already been set as priority areas for BER that would benefit, and a number that could be added to that list with an increase in budget. And I appreciate your effort and others in helping see an increase in budget for those really important programs. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Doctor.
And now we have Senator Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, all of you, for going through the process and to be able to go through these questions and issues. Stachelberg, let me ask you a question. What are your thoughts about Congress having the authority to determine the scope and authority of federal agencies? Does Congress have the authority to determine the scope and the task on federal agencies?
If I understand your question, Senator, I think that Congress, working with other entities, has the ability to pass laws, and if that's what you're asking me.
Sure, yeah, just trying to figure out, I guess just more of a constitutional question of who sets the parameters for agencies. Can agencies decide what they want to do, or are those parameters set by Congress?
Senator, I've been nominated for the position of Assistant Secretary for Policy Management.
But dealing with policy,
budget, and we'll absolutely be dealing with policy. Looking forward to working with you and others on this committee. I think that's outside the scope of what I will be doing on a day-to-day basis. I know the one thing that I will do is I will follow the regulations and the rules and the laws and work to implement the policies of the Secretary and the President.
That's great. I asked, in 2016, you wrote at one point, in the face of persistent inaction in Congress to close the gaps in the nation's gun laws that leave many communities vulnerable to near-daily gun violence, today's common-sense actions demonstrate this administration's continued commitment to taking a comprehensive approach to addressing this public health crisis. Okay, no issue there. Then the next statement is, Center for American Progress is eager to continue working with leaders across the country to follow the President's example and explore opportunities to take action now without waiting for a recalcitrant legislature. That's one. In 2013, you wrote, there are more than a dozen appropriation riders passed each year, typically without any discussion or debate, which significantly limit the federal government's ability to regulate the firearms industry. Congress has interfered with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives' ability to fulfill its mission by enacting riders to the appropriation bills that dilute its power over licensed gun dealers. So the reason I ask is it's a philosophical question, but it is a practical effect to try to figure out just your perspective on whether Congress has the authority, for instance, to give instructions through legislation, that's appropriation riders, is legislation, to give instructions to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Explosives to be able to deal with what they can do and cannot do, or to be able to deal with firearms, or if agencies or entities, or your office in the future in dealing with firearms policy on Department of Interior lands, for instance, what that's going to look like. How wide is that latitude, or is that set by Congress?
Senator, I look forward to working with you on further addressing this question, but let me zoom out for just one moment and say that absolutely Congress passes laws and works with agencies. As you know, the executive branch has the ability to pass regulations, and so there is one of the things that I'm looking forward to, if I'm confirmed, is working with Congress to achieve policies that address climate change, affect the conservation of our public lands. And that's the job that I'm before you now seeking to talk about. And so if you're asking me whether agencies have latitude to issue regulations and Congress has latitude to pass laws and write appropriations riders, absolutely both of them are true.
Yeah, to me, it's more of a philosophical conversation, try to figure out what kind of relationship we would have, because constitutionally, Congress obviously writes the laws. Regulations are created that have to be consistent with those laws. A regulator can't just create regulations outside of the scope of what law is already there. And so what I'm trying to figure out is when you write things like, oh, recalcitrant, Congress is not doing it, and so the administration is going to do it, or that appropriation riders are limiting the actions of an agency and what they want to do. I'm trying to figure out a philosophical basis on this. I do want to drill down on one other issue as well. You mentioned about the success of the Endangered Species Act. There are some species that have recovered on that, but if I remember correctly, it's about 2% of the species that have actually graduated out of being listed in the Endangered Species Act. It's been a challenge for us in Oklahoma, for instance. We're dealing with the lesser prairie chicken in the western side of our state. We've done a lot of voluntary cooperation. Our farmers and ranchers and commercial entities have done a lot of work. And when the agency steps in and says, thanks for all your work on this, but now we're going to take it from here, it diminishes some of that. So we do have some work to be able to do to actually have the Endangered Species Act actually be successful, because I don't see a 2% graduation rate as successful. So there's some things that we still need to be able to do to try to recover these species and graduate them off.
Sir, if I just might comment, if I'm confirmed, I look forward to coming to Oklahoma and learning more about it. I think the partnership of ranchers and farmers and local communities and engaged stakeholders is essential, not just for the successful implementation of the Endangered Species Act, but for all the laws and policies that are promulgated by the Department of Interior. And if I'm confirmed, I hope I'll be able to work further with you and your staff on that issue.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Langford. Do we have Senator Hickenlooper?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank all of you for, not just for being here today, but for your public service. I tremendously appreciate it. Dr. Burhy, I saw that you went and you got a PhD in biogeochemistry. I want to just publicly salute you for that, because that's got to be one of the great interconnections of science, which I think if you look at where cutting-edge research is today, so much of it is taking place at a nexus like that. And I have a master's in geology, but it would be considered primitive from anything that you've studied. And I know that Berkeley is one of the top schools in the country. So again, to have dealt with what you did, what your family did to come here and to achieve that is really remarkable. I wanted to ask you, looking at or beyond direct air capture, nature affords us a multitude of ways of capturing carbon and storing carbon. And how do you think about funding that research and supporting entrepreneurs whose natural carbon removal technologies perhaps don't get to the market for 5 or 10 years as opposed to being there already? And I also love just if you could provide a example from the some examples from the soil carbon and mineral sequestration. I don't even know what blue carbon is, but one of my staff dug that up. Anyway, give us a quick answer on that.
Thank you, Senator, and I appreciate your comments. And, biogeochemistry is, as you said, a very interdisciplinary area. But as, again, you correctly said, we have to think in those interdisciplinary perspectives if we are going to kind of keep pushing the frontiers of the science. And I'm a huge fan of geology, obviously, so thank you. So I just to address your question, nature indeed is one of our best allies in addressing the climate challenge. There are multiple solutions available. This is the area of research where I have spent a considerable amount of a part of my career. There are multiple areas where we are able to actually take out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, for example, and store it in more slower cycling pools in soil. And doing so in soil and other natural environments, in blue carbon even becomes an important issue, as in carbon in oceans and ocean sediment, in the ocean system, in marine systems and aquatic systems in general. All of those are options that are incredible, available, and keep in mind that the way we have used natural resources historically has caused a lot of carbon to be released from the natural ecosystems into the atmosphere. But we can at least reverse some of that and actually use natural ecosystems to sequester a significant amount of carbon and take it out. So draw down from the atmosphere and reduce the atmospheric burden of greenhouse gases. This is a thriving area of research, and also a thriving area that is of interest to businesses and land managers across the board. And I think I agree with you that sometimes research could be a little slow, but this is in one area where the technology transfer and the partnerships between science and industry is moving at a really fast pace. And I think everything we could do to help in that respect from the scientific standpoint could only help address these incredible climate challenge that we have in front of us.
It's an exciting time. I think you're going to be the right person in the right place. And I'm going to, I'm not sure I'm going to get to you, Dr. Richmond, but trust me, I am so impressed with all that you've done. And I saw that you taught for 5 years at Bryn Mawr, where my great aunt went, and so I'm a huge fan of that institution. Ms. Stachelberg, I want to just put in a plug and ask your opinion. So often when science is occurring and research is occurring, some of the most important work is done by the people that aren't scientists, and those who are able to keep an enterprise on budget and on task. And obviously you've done that in a number of different arenas. Is that somehow, describe just briefly, and I've used up too much of my time, that ability, how do you see that helping in the Department of Interior and the role you're proposed for?
Senator, thank you for that question, and I will be brief. That is what is exciting about the Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget. I have spent my career working to ensure that teams have the support they need, the budgets they need, the direction that they need, providing strategic guidance and leadership to teams and bureaus and divisions, and that's what I've done throughout my career. If I'm confirmed, I look forward to doing it not just with scientists, not just with climate experts, not just with firefighters, not just with those who work on water and mines and Native Americans, but with all of the department assets to ensure that we conserve our public lands, that we ensure that we have an outdoor economy that is creating jobs and working for all of us. It's the kind of work that I like to do, bringing disparate people together, working across the aisle, and if I'm confirmed, I look forward to working with you and others on this committee to ensure that the department is moving in the right direction.
Great, and I have seen firsthand experience of the sensitivity of scientists, that probably only matched by the sensitivity of senators. Anyway, I yield my time or my lack of time to the chair.
We're not that sensitive, sir. We have Senator Marshall this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to our nominees. My first question is for Dr. Richmond. Dr. Richmond, the Big 12 is one of the most storied conferences in the history of our nation. It's known for its academic excellence and obviously the strongest basketball conference in the history of this nation for the last 10 years, and a top 3 football programs as well. Let's assume that Texas and Oklahoma leaves, and Oklahoma State, from my colleague from Oklahoma, that they're out of the conference. If Kansas State was playing West Virginia, A, who would you root for? And B, can you think of a funner place to be than a Kansas State, West Virginia football game?
I'd probably be watching the Ducks. How can I win by answering that
That's a good
correctly?
answer. Good answer.
Well, great answer. No, I certainly from one Wildcat to another. What does Senator Roberts say? The ever-fighting mighty Wildcats, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you.
Let's talk about something really important to Kansas, and that's biofuels, and I think important to the environmental footprint of this nation. What do you see for the opportunities for biofuels and specifically renewable diesel and biodiesel?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator Marshall. Let me just start by saying, on our farm in the early morning, years and years ago, my father got up every morning and shoveled coal into the furnace to keep our house warm. And now I know that there's a nuclear plant in Kansas that's providing 800,000 people energy. What a transition that's made.
18% of our energy from that nuclear plant.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And so transitions can happen. And transitions can certainly happen. We can make much more progress in the bioenergy sphere. But again, it takes we just got to make sure that we're doing the best research that we can, getting it to technology, and getting it further. But at that and any of the other fossil fuels, on all of these, we cannot give up on any of these fuels at all because we need them to drive our economy. That said, we also need to make sure that we reduce our greenhouse gases and make sure that everything is the emissions can be not be detrimental to the climate as they are right now. And so all of these energy sources, it's important for us to go forward. And nuclear, of course, in the respect of emissions is a good resource. But we have to work hard on the carbon capture and other ways in order to reduce the greenhouse emissions.
So I'm excited to hear you talk about taking traditional energy and making it cleaner. That's a great start. What would the impact of year-round E15 have in this country as well as the rest of the world?
Do you mean in terms of if we make advances in these areas, how would it
if we were using E15 year-round, what impact would it have on tailpipe emissions?
Could you explain to me what E15 is? I'm sorry.
It's an ethanol blend
of
15%.
Of course, with ethanol. Well, I think it's important for us to show that this is a very powerful way to generate energy for cars. Sorry, I didn't know that it called that. But on the other hand, it does give a message to the world and helps us with regards to being able to export and do issues in this area. So it's important. It's important. We just have to work some details out.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Burhy, let's talk about soil carbon sequestration just for a second. Certainly, I'm excited about those opportunities. You know, the same farmers that took 10 bushel of wheat land and turned it into 70 bushel an acre land could develop something at Kansas State University to be used in the ocean. We're taking plankton and teaching it how to absorb more carbon, which is simply photosynthesis, where we would farm the carbon in the ocean, the plankton in the ocean as well. What do you see on the horizon? What are the opportunities for soil carbon sequestration? And please don't talk about no-till farming or cover crops, which we've been doing on our farm in Kansas for 25 years. What's out there? What's the vision? What's the future look like to you?
Thank you, Senator, for that important question. Yes, this is an area that I'm very, very passionate about. And in addition to the really great options that are on the table, some of which you mentioned, I think we have an incredible amount of opportunity in front of us when it comes to working with land managers to improve soil health, which is beneficial for improving their productivity, but at the same time builds up carbon in soil and takes it out of the atmosphere and builds up in soil. Some of the most promising technologies out there and approaches include, for example, bioenergy crops that sometimes tend to be perennial and also have deep rooting systems that are critical for carbon sequestration. But we also have to bring into the mix to a even more extent how we can use carbon that is currently in waste streams and bring it back into the soil, which also comes with additional nutrients. And I'm talking about animal manure, animal waste in general, as well as even sometimes human municipal waste in the form of biosolids that is now being tried across the board as an option for improving soil health, soil carbon sequestration, and thereby improving productivity of agricultural and working lands in general. I think there are a number of these options, in particular ones that have to do with options that allow us to use waste and reroute waste and use it as a resource, options that allow us to store carbon in deep soils in particular, with deeper rooted, in particular perennials, all of these and many, many more. This is a very exciting area for this field, as you can imagine. And I'm very passionate and excited about the opportunities to work with land managers and all sorts of stakeholders in this area, because this is something that is happening, and I think we need to figure out a way to make sure that we're helping all of those that are doing the good work in this area. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask all nominees to any of the on any of the committees on which I sit the following two initial questions. So I'd like to ask all of you this en masse. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
Dr. Berhe, I was very interested to learn of the work that you did with the Advanced Geo Partnership that focused on empowering geoscientists to respond to and prevent sexual harassment, discrimination, and bullying in research workplaces. This is an area of concern to me because as we talk about our country's ability to compete, especially in the STEM areas where women and minorities drop out of these fields in droves, your work in preventing sexual harassment and these kinds of workplace issues is really interesting to me. So, Dr. Berhe, what have you learned working on the partnership, and how would you apply that learning in leading the Office of Science?
Thank you very much, Senator. You're right. This is a really important area. If we're going to continue to maintain a very competitive and successful scientific workforce, ensuring welfare of that workforce, and ensuring that people from all walks of life can enter science and succeed in the scientific workforce is a really important goal, and it's been a goal of mine in my entire professional career. In particular, what we've done in the Advanced Geo Partnership, which is, as you know, an NSF-funded effort, is to make sure that we're empowering scientists to address these issues and prevent them from happening in the first place. Create workplace cultures that actually limit the occurrence of these incidents. We have legal mechanisms to address them after the fact, but I personally believe that's a little too late time to address them. So we could actually use a community model, a community building approach, where we're empowering scientists to work together to establish a culture where everyone that enters our academic institutions deserves to just be able to focus on their work in peace without any kind of exclusionary behavior, and that if we establish these shared goals and learn about what's right and what's not right ahead of time, I think we could do a lot of good. And that's one of the most important lessons that has come out of the Advanced Geo Project. Obviously, the Advanced Geo Project was focused on very different kinds of institutions, in particular universities, not necessarily kind of the Office of Science type of scale, even though Office of Science funds universities, obviously. But I think there are important lessons of community building and partnerships that would allow us to prevent things.
And are these lessons learned the things that you will apply heading up the Office of Science? Because I agree with you that prevention and education and awareness and creating an environment where these kinds of behaviors get reported and dealt with is really important. So I assume that you will implement or institute these kinds of practices.
Thank you again,
in
Senator.
your new position, should you be confirmed.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to working with the leadership at DOE and the national labs and learning about what kind of things are occurring right now in that space, and and sharing things we've learned from the advanced geo and other opportunities.
I am going to be interested in continuing a dialogue with you in these areas, and I am running out of time, but I just wanted to mention to Ms. Stachelberg the important role that the Department of Interior plays in serving indigenous communities, including our native Hawaiian communities. So I certainly look forward to speaking with you about this in more detail during a future discussion.
Senator, I look forward to that if I'm confirmed. Thank you.
So, Dr. Richmond, maintaining a culture of scientific integrity within DOE's Office of Science is critically important. And what steps will you take to support DOE's scientists and foster scientific communication with the public?
Thank you very much for that question. It's really important and also timely, Senator. My role, if confirmed, would be to ensure that the leadership sends the message strongly down and out that scientific integrity is our priority. As a scientist, we have ways, in terms of the research that we do, making certain that it is valid, reproducible, and comes to the appropriate conclusions based on the data. Mm-hmm. We have checks and balances that are there in order to ensure that the best science gets out and gets very visible, as long as we're sticking with the data. But it goes beyond that in regards to being able to have the public trust us with regards to whether they believe what we are saying is important and the priorities that we are setting. And therefore, it's important that we use data that has the integrity that allows us to make the important points to move the needle on some of the important issues that we have in technology and also energy workforce development. So I can assure you that that would be a top priority for me in working with the Secretary to ensure that scientific integrity is operative at all levels, and also that we provide the public and the taxpayers the knowledge that that's the way we operate. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'm glad that you mentioned the need to restore the public's trust in science and facts as a way to make decisions, because there are major concerns that I have as to that, whether or not we do have a public that relies on facts and science for decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr. Chairman.
King, by virtual.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. King, Senator King, I'm so sorry. I missed our good friend way up in Alaska. I missed her. I didn't see her over there in Alaska. Senator Murkowski, I'm so sorry.
I'm delighted to defer to the senator from Alaska.
And then Senator King, you'll be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate that. Quickly, and thank you for your willingness to come before the committee today and answer some questions. First, this is a question, I think, to both Dr. Richmond and to you, Dr. Berhe. I've been paying very close attention to the Arctic Energy Office. This is going to be playing an ever-increasing role in our nation's national security policy as the Arctic becomes certainly a focal point when we look to geopolitics, but also certainly in the climate space and initiatives as well. So, Dr. Richmond, Dr. Berhe, I would ask for a commitment from both of you today that if you're confirmed, you will collaborate closely with the Arctic Energy Office, promote Arctic-related science issues in your positions, and ensure that the AEO retains its independence and its cross-cutting nature. So I'd like to know that you're going to be supporting that moving forward.
Yes, Senator Murkowski, this is an incredibly important issue, not just for Alaskans, for the country, that we stay involved in many of the things having to do with microgrids and so forth that you have in Alaska can be really cross-cutting and also very forward-looking as we go forward, in addition to all the other EERE activities we have in Alaska. You have a spectacular state, but you also have a spectacular opportunity to really lead the country in many of these areas, so yes.
Thank you for acknowledging that we do have a role that goes far beyond the boundaries of the state of Alaska. It's very global, so we appreciate that. And my friend Senator King, who deferred to me, knows that well as the co-chair of the Arctic Conference. Dr. Berhe, your views, please.
Yes, Senator, you have my commitment. The Arctic is an important area for many reasons, including the beauty and the majestic environments, and you have my commitment that these are very, very important areas that I would look forward to talking to you and your staff and working with all the stakeholders on these important issues.
Good. I appreciate that. In addition to great beauty, we have really, really smart and innovative people, so tap into those.
Yes.
A question for you, Ms. Stachelberg. The Office of Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget obviously plays a key role in the management of our nation's resources, including the collecting, the accounting, and the distribution of revenues from energy and mineral leases, whether it's on our federal lands or on our tribal lands. So many of our rural communities rely on these disbursements from the department for everything from schools to community services. Many of these revenues go to pay for many of the conservation programs that have very broad bipartisan support here. I know that you have not been at the department. You probably have some limited insight in the current administration's oil and gas lease pause, but you are here as the nominee for the chief financial officer for the department. And so in that prospective role, do you think that it is prudent to put a pause on one of the main drivers of revenue for the department while the administration is proposing a massive spending increase for the department?
Senator, thank you for your question, and it's good to see you again. I'm not confirmed yet, as you know. We've had conversations before about the incredible opportunity that the Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget has in working with the career staff, incredible staff in Alaska. And if I'm confirmed, I look forward to doing that. I am nominated by the President and follow the policies of the President, Secretary Holland, and those are their policies and plan to follow those.
Well, it's just, again, I'm asking from the perspective of the financial management, the fiscal management here, and it just seems a bit incongruous that that you would be clearly limiting the ability of receiving these revenues that are so key to some of not only the administration's priorities, but I think priorities here in Congress. One last quick question for you. As you know, I am the senior Republican on the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee, very familiar with the Department of Interior's budget. The President's budget includes $17.6 billion for the department this year. It is a big job. It is an extraordinarily diverse department, if you will, in terms of budget areas. So very quickly, your experience with developing and implementing large budgets and your familiarity with the department's annual budget process.
I am familiar with the department's budget process. One of the reasons why I'm eager to be confirmed is not only to work with this committee on so many of the issues, but to begin to work on the FY23 budget and work with you on the issues that you have. I've spent 2.5 decades working on budgets, finances, doing cross-cutting work at complex, large organizations. I have the skills to bring people together. I think one of the interesting and unique roles that the Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget plays at the Department of Interior is to bring sometimes competing, sometimes conflicting views together, whether it's on budget, whether it's on management, listening to members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, listening to perspectives from people from Alaska, and we'll hear from Maine. Those are the kinds of things that I have done. As I think Senator Collins might have said to you, I have a track record of working across the aisle, working with diverse people. And one of the jobs of the Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget is to be one of those liaisons with respect to appropriations and budget. I believe I have the skills, the temperament, and I'm eager, if confirmed, to work with you and others on this committee to ensure that the Department of Interior's budget, the programs that it runs, conservation, climate, Western water, fireland management are all taken care of, and that the departments and bureaus and divisions have the appropriate resources they need to do their jobs.
Thank you for the response. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Senator King.
Thank you, Senator. Now, Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Richmond, we've mentioned the subject of climate change several times. I'm haunted by the experience of England between the world wars, particularly in the 30s. Winston Churchill wrote his first volume of the history of World War II called The Gathering Storm, which was about the period of the 30s when English politicians essentially denied or ignored the growing threat from a militarizing Germany. I wonder how we're going to be viewed 20 years from now in terms of the threat of climate change. This summer has really brought it into stark focus with wildfires earlier than ever, larger than ever, drought, the excessive heat in the Northwest. If ever we're getting a warning, it's now, and yet we're still sort of arguing about it and moving forward, and we are taking steps in various bills and legislation. But do you share my sense of urgency about this, and that, you know, when the history of this period is written, I want to be Winston Churchill, not Neville Chamberlain. Can we do more, and should we do more?
Thank you, Senator King, for that really important question. You mentioned that, will we look back after 30 years and wonder if we made the wrong decision? I'd say that's closer to 20, maybe 15. This is urgent. We have to take action now. And the Department of Energy has to be the leader in taking those initiatives that will make us not regret that we did nothing for the now and the next even 5 or 6 years, whatever it is. And I assure you that that will be, if confirmed, a top priority of mine to basically save the planet, to do the technologies that we need to save the planet for ourselves, but also our children. Thank you.
Well, a young Harvard senior in 1940 wrote his thesis called "While England Slept." That was, of course, John F. Kennedy. And I don't want somebody writing a book, you know, while America slept or while the world slept. We went into this really extraordinary crisis, the likes of which I don't think we've seen. So I look forward to working with you on that. I want to ask you a somewhat difficult question, but it gets at some of the questions we've had today. There have been questions raised about Dr. Berhe's experience and administrative experience. You're going to be the Undersecretary for Science. She's going to be the Director of the Office of Science. Do you have confidence in her ability to manage that office and to lead that office in terms of the important scientific research that we must do?
Yes, I am fully confident that she will be capable of fulfilling the duties of that position, and I look forward to working with her to see if any way I can continue to support the efforts that she will be leading.
I'm delighted to hear that. And to go back to the question of climate change, you know, there were sort of Chicken Littles or Paul Revere's, whatever you want to call them, in the past, Malthus being one, but technology saved us from Malthus's predictions. And that's why I think the work that this office, that you will be doing, is so essential. Science must lead us out of this crisis.
Yes, I agree, and let me reemphasize the point that I made earlier, that our Department of Energy national laboratories are really the ones that can make the big difference that we need to make. We just need to make certain that they have the appropriate resources to be able to move forward, because again, they can take things from the beginning of the journey, the fundamental science, all the way to the end in which it's deployed. And that is going to be so critical that we do that quickly without breaking down the stovepipes in order to get an answer to some of these issues that we so critically need to find answers to.
And everything from soil's ability to sequester carbon to carbon removal from the atmosphere to energy storage. I mean, all of those are scientific questions. Ms. Stachelberg, let me ask a completely different question. Senator Heinrich mentioned the Great American Outdoors Act, and I think one of the most important principles is that execution is as important as vision. We supplied the vision, and now you have to supply the execution and the implementation. I hope that you will commit to absolute transparency and clarity about the administration of those of the Great American Outdoors Act, the Restore Our Parks Act, where the money is going, how it's decided where it's going, what the formulas are. I think that would be very important in giving us the confidence in the administration of this important program.
Senator, as I said earlier, I think the Great American Outdoors Act certainly is one of the Secretary's highest priorities. It was a crowning achievement last year in a significant bipartisan way. You absolutely have my 100% commitment on that front. In addition to committing to you to be transparent on this issue, that's the way I will work if I'm confirmed as Assistant Secretary for Planning, Management, and Budget at the Department of Interior. I think it's also important, especially with the Great American Outdoors Act and the Land and Water Conservation Fund and spending the taxpayers' money wisely, that we encourage local, community-driven conservation projects. And I'm looking forward, if I'm confirmed, to working with you and this committee to ensure that we spend those dollars wisely, that we create outdoor recreation opportunities and provide much-needed open spaces for families, and boost local economies. So thank you for your question.
Thank you. And thanks to all three of our nominees this morning for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Congratulations to all three of you. It's been an incredible morning just listening to your responses to the questions posed. Dr. Richmond, let me ask you, based on your career and experiences with DOE, I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts on the current status of the U.S. workforce when it comes to RD&D for new technologies. Is there more that the United States government needs to be doing to enhance STEM education in order to attract more scientists and researchers into this field, knowing that the 21st century is going to take us in this innovation economy? I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Senator, for that question, because it's one that I'm as passionate about the workforce as I am about innovation. I have worked with many of the DOE lab leadership over the years, even doing research on issues of workforce in their laboratories to try to understand how we can increase not only the number of women and minorities that are in their laboratories, but also get them into leadership positions, which then, of course, we all know makes a big difference. I think there's much that we can do in the educational arena to increase the number of students going into STEM. But I must also say that one thing that I think is oftentimes missed is that what we really lose out on in this country is this retention of students that want to be scientists at 16 or 18 and then aren't by the time they're 22 or 24. We are ranked one of the lowest countries in the world with regards to retention. That's embarrassing. We have to work harder on that retention. And so that's why I believe really strongly, and especially for women and underrepresented groups, because their numbers are the lowest. And so I do believe that there are things that we can do at the undergraduate, graduate level and above, and of course K through 12. But if I'm talking about retention, that's where the problem child is.
And I agree. And listen, this is an area, as we're looking at the new legislation, whether it's this bipartisan legislation that we're working on now or in the future, the workforce is key. And bringing this workforce along with us, but giving them the opportunities and retaining them in this kind of space for innovation and science is so important. So, if you have ideas, I'm looking forward to working with you around the retention issue. This is an important part of the legislation that I'm working on, bringing that workforce along, but really focusing on how we incentivize, how do we engage, whether it is learning for the first time around STEM or retraining or taking the skills that you already have and transitioning them. I mean, there's a lot of work in this space that we need to do. So whatever ideas you have on it, I'm open to listening to you.
Well,
so
I would be thrilled to no end to work with you on this. I think in the sphere of community colleges, but in addition, thinking of graduate school, we are paying our graduate students, who are the seed corn of our future, at levels that you have to ask the graduate students why they would even go to graduate school being paid the level that they're being paid for 5 or 6 years in their 20s or 7 years in their 20s. We have to seriously, as a nation, look, and across the agencies, look how we can make sure that we are attracting the best and brightest, and that they can afford to do the training to make them leaderships, to take on leadership roles. So I would be thrilled to work with you on any aspect of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know my time is running short. Dr. Berhe, let me ask you about this. This is another area that I don't think we're as focused on as we should be as we look at the global competition over new technologies. It's the standards setting process. Standard specifications define performance requirements for materials, for products and services related technologies around the world. And I've watched as China has already established goals to set global standards for emerging technologies like 5G, internet, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and other technologies that impact the energy sector. I'm curious if you have thoughts on this. Can you discuss the importance of U.S. involvement in the standards setting process? We cannot forget that. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Senator. I agree this is a really important area. Some of the efforts on setting standards is beyond the purview of the Office of Science, obviously. But if you think about contributions that the office and the research that enables can, the best way we can make sure that the standards that we think are important are set is to out-innovate and out-compete everybody in having the best science and technology products out there and the most efficient systems. And I think we could do that, and we must do that. We have to keep doing so if we're going to ensure U.S. competitiveness in a variety of areas that are related to the topics you discussed. I would love opportunity. I know we don't have time right now, but I would love the opportunity to talk to you and work with you on these.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have one more question with Chairman's indulgence, if that's all right. Ms. Stachelberg, is it? Let me ask you this, because this is another area that I have focused on, and we've talked about oil and gas leasing in this Energy Committee ad nauseum. Let me just say that. But in recent years, the BLM has spent an inordinate amount of time and resources offering vast acreages for oil and gas development on lands where the oil and gas industry doesn't really have a development interest, and on lands that have little to no potential for development. What does that mean? That makes these lands available for leasing only fuels. It really only fuels a speculative industry and wastes the BLM resources while locking up the land from being managed for other purposes, like a wildlife habitat preservation, outdoor recreation, grazing. That happens in my state as well. So I introduced the End Speculative Oil and Gas Leasing Act. And what it does is it prohibits BLM from offering leases on lands determined to have low or no drilling potential, requiring BLM to evaluate eligible lands for the development potential instead. And so my question to you is I'd hope that you would have an open mind around this and be willing to work with me, or at least take a look at the legislation and give me your input or the department's input around this legislation.
Senator, I am familiar with your legislation. I think it's very interesting, and I definitely, if I'm confirmed, look forward to working with you and others on this committee on reforming the leasing program. It's a priority of the Secretary. If I'm confirmed, it would be a priority of mine as well.
Thank you, and thank you, all three.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For both Dr. Richmond and Dr. Berhe, Dr. Faith Birrell, who's head of the International Energy Agency, has said that carbon capture and storage is the most important technology that exists today. And I would ask, do you agree with his assessment that it is the most important, or one of the most important energy technologies today?
Yes, Senator, thank you for that question. I agree that it's incredibly important. Absolutely.
Dr. Berhe?
Yes, Senator, I also agree it's an extremely important area and important technology that's out there.
And do you agree that global demand for fossil fuels, including coal, will continue to be significant, particularly among developing economies in the years to come? Same question for each of you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first of your question.
Do you agree that global demand for fossil fuels, including coal, will continue to be significant, particularly among developing economies in the years to come?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Yes.
And so then do you think it's very important that we lead the way forward and really crack the code on adding carbon capture and storage so that we can address carbon in those industries and really lead the way forward and find get it done not only from a technological standpoint, but from a commercially viable standpoint. Same question for both of you.
Absolutely, Senator. Absolutely.
Yes,
And then, so if confirmed, will you work with myself, our chairman, and others to crack the code on CCUS specifically, including for coal-fired electric, as well as renewables and others?
Yes.
If confirmed, I absolutely would be looking forward to working with the committee and others on this important issue.
Same
Dr. Berhe?
answer. If confirmed, I would be very honored to work with you all on this. It's a very important area.
Thank you. For Ms. Stachelberg, two questions. One is on the moratorium on energy development on federal lands. How will you approach making sure the Interior Department acts to comply with the court order to resume those lease sales?
Senator, thank you for your question. I will comply with all court orders, with all congressional mandates, as I have in all my previous jobs, and waiting for the court's decision, and we'll work with the Secretary and others at the Department of Interior on implementation.
And do you agree public safety in Indian country is a very important issue and a big issue, something that needs to be addressed?
I absolutely do. Not only public safety in Indian country, but education and access to public lands, yes.
One of we're short of BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, law enforcement officers throughout reservations across the Midwest. We've established a training academy, essentially at Spirit Lake in North Dakota. Will you work with me to make sure that we continue to develop that academy to train BIA law enforcement officers for the whole upper Midwest region?
Senator, if I am confirmed, I hope to work with you on that issue and a range of other issues that affect Native Americans, the law enforcement community, and those interests in North Dakota.
We need the Bureau of Reclamation to work with us on water issues, certainly throughout the West, but very much in my state. Will you commit to work with me, as well as my other Western colleagues, to make sure that the Bureau of Reclamation is able to help meet the important water needs of the communities in our state and throughout the West?
Senator, I absolutely commit to you, if I'm confirmed, to working with you and others on the challenging issues of Western water resilience. I do want to just note that I was heartened to see that in the bipartisan infrastructure deal, there is over $8 billion for repairing aging infrastructure, water recycling, reuse, storage planning, including rural water projects. And so if I'm confirmed, I would love to work with you and your staff on those issues.
Thank you. Thanks to all three of you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back the rest of my time.
Oh, thank you, Senator. You're so kind. And we're going to have to go vote now, but I want to thank all three of you. You did an excellent job. We appreciate you being here. And I want to thank also all of our participants. We appreciate your being here. And members will have until 6 p.m. tomorrow to submit additional questions for the record. So the committee stands adjourned.
Thank you.